All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be an awesome podcast today. I'm joined by one of my professional female MMA fighters, a woman that's fought for Bellator. She's fought in Japan. She has an incredible story of perseverance, and what she's gone through to be the woman that you're going to see here today is truly inspiring. So before we get into it, I want to make sure to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a sponsor here at our podcast, and they've stood with us since the beginning. VetLife is a 501c3, a nonprofit company of veterans for veterans. If you know someone that was over in active duty and has come home and is struggling to blend back into normal society, or that is just looking to get the benefits that they're owed, please reach out to VetLife or reach out to me personally. The easiest way to do so is on their Instagram or Facebook at VetLife, or their website is vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I'm joined today by Tabatha Watkins. Tabatha, for the people that don't know you, let's take this story all the way back. Talk a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up? You know, were you born and raised here in Michigan? And what were you like as a child?
Okay. I was born and raised in Michigan. Most of my life, I lived in Grayling, which is a small town in northern Michigan. My parents moved up there when I was like 2, so most of my life I spent up there. It's a very small town, so I'm a small town girl, and grew up in a town where there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity, especially for martial arts, so it was something that I got into a lot later in life. But all through school, I've always been active. Since I was 4 years old, I was playing sports. I played baseball until I was about 12, and they kicked me off the boys team and told me I had to play softball because I was a girl. So yeah, and then from then on out, I played softball until my junior year of high school, and then my senior year of high school, I played soccer. So it was a situation where I had been training two practices my sophomore year to be the varsity shortstop in softball, and I was doing 2 practices every day. When I went my junior year, I would be the starting shortstop. Well, the coaches ended up changing, and they didn't have me do that, and I didn't play as much as I would have liked to, and I trained really hard for that position, and I didn't get it. So my senior year, I was like, I don't want to play softball. You know, it kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, and I was like, I'm going to try something new. So I actually played soccer, and I started midfield my senior year, varsity soccer, and then I also did ski team, which I don't know where else there is in Michigan that there's a racing ski team, downhill ski. So I did that, and it was just something that I was like, I'm gonna try it. You know, I've always skied because I'm northern Michigan, so but that's my sports, I guess. You know.
So you sit here today, a professional female fighter who's really about to write her comeback story in 2021. But as a young woman graduating high school, what were your goals or dreams, or what did you think life had in store for you?
I really where I'm at now is not anywhere close to what I thought I would be when I was in high school, trying to think about, what your future is, because that's what they, tell you to do. Actually, originally, I was trying to go into the Navy ROTC right out of high school. So I had applied for the scholarship and went through the whole process. It was a 6 months process. There's a lot of applications and interviews, and you had to take your ASVAB, stuff like that, meet with a Navy recruiter. And I actually made it to the final category, where they interviewed I think 10 people in the region. So I think it was between Michigan, Indiana, and probably Illinois or something. There was one other state. And the Navy could pick, I think, 8. They were supposed to be able to pick 8 people from that group that could move forward and actually I would have gotten a full ride Navy ROTC scholarship. So I would go to college for 4 years, and then I would be a graduate with whatever degree I had and as a Navy officer. So that was originally my dream and my goal, and I ended up being 7th or 8th picked, but they only had the funds to pick 6th that year. So I just barely missed it, and I was like, okay, I didn't really know how to handle that, because I was like, I would have made it, but for some reason they couldn't pick as many people as usual that year. So that completely changed it, and I ended up going into engineering. I always did like drafting and stuff. I've always been big into like kind of like an artsy side of me, but more like a technical. That's what I've always been into, drafting. I took all the drafting classes in high school. I took architecture, stuff like that. And so I ended up going into engineering. I did a year-long internship at an engineering company called Kodiak Group in Grayling between high school and college. And I ended up going to Eastern Michigan University for product design and development. And so when I was 18, I moved down to Ypsilanti and started my college.
Now, did you graduate from college? Did you get a degree in that field? Did you, leave that career? Talk us a little bit through that point.
I didn't graduate. My path changed again. So right before I moved downstate, I actually started training. So I started in a really small jiu-jitsu school in Roscommon, which is like 15 minutes away from Grayling. And it was literally just like a little room in a gym with some old wrestling mats that I had like a blue belt coach. And I mean, he got my start, so he was just teaching gi jiu-jitsu really. And then he also worked with an MMA coach, but there was like maybe 5 people that trained there, and my MMA coach was Dave Shepard. My jiu-jitsu coach was Ryan Meck. And after 6 months of just jiu-jitsu and like hitting pads, I was like, you know what? I want to take my first MMA fight before I move downstate, So I actually got into it for self-defense and to keep active because, like I said, I was in sports from when I was 4 years old. So that year-long internship, I didn't have high school sports. I didn't have anything. So I was like, well, I want to learn self-defense and I might as well do it to stay active. And then because I've always competed, I craved competition like 6 months in. And if I could change that, I totally would. If anybody has ever looked me up and sees my amateur fight, my amateur debut, and then looks at me now, they're like, there's no way that's the same person, because it was just, I should not have fought. I never even sparred in my life. And that was the first time I fought Sheena. So then trained about a year there, and that's when I moved downstate.
So let's take us to the point where you met me, you met SFS. So I was originally introduced to you. I don't know if you were engaged at the time or were you married. I'm not really sure, but let's talk a little bit about that story. You and a gentleman named Jake Shanks came into SFS one day. Let's start to create the story from that point, because that's how I was introduced to Tabatha. I didn't know a lot of these background details.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I met Jake Shanks up in Roscommon at that first gym I ever trained at. So he had known a couple of the people I was training with and moved back to Michigan from Oklahoma. So I met him there. And we were both in a situation where we needed, we couldn't live on our own. So he was going to move downstate with me to, help me through college and stuff. And right before we moved downstate is when we got engaged or married. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. Maybe we were married before we moved downstate, but got married very young age. I was 19.
How long were you dating before you were married?
6 months. So it's an interesting story. So I used to be very deep into my Christian faith. I still am. I'm a Christian and I still believe in all of that stuff. I was just through my teen years, I was involved in Christian teen retreat programs, and I was very deep into it. I ended up getting baptized when I was 17. I got baptized as a baby. My parents were Catholic, so I was baptized at 8 months old or something. But as an adult, I was I want to be baptized and actually experience it. I don't know what it's like when I was a little baby, so it was something I did. Jake ended up doing it with me, and then my pastor basically was like, well, you can't live together if you're not married, type of thing, and you just got baptized. Yeah, so times have changed, and there's a lot of, especially in religion, there's a lot of people that are very traditional still, but I believe times have changed, and I don't think that it works like that anymore, but I listened to him, and that's why I got married young and not had been with him for a very long time. So that was the reason.
So then you start your journey with us a little bit. You two are together. I believe you competed a couple times, and then you had a falling out with Jake. And is that the point that you moved back upstate, or were you? I mean, I remember you were, I think, living with Jake and Dave or Joel for a little bit.
Yep.
Take us through the point of like from the time that you moved down. What does your life look like to that point? And then let's just create that chapter of the book.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting story. So, yeah, Jake and I had an apartment in Ypsilanti, which was because I was still going to school. I was going to school. I was working part-time. I had a few different jobs throughout the course of my college. And then we started training. I actually trained at A2 Fitness for Damon Johnson. He mostly a fitness school, but he did coach MMA. And that was my first MMA school here. But I was only with him for probably, I don't know, like less than a year. And then Jake had heard about James and wanted to go check out SFS. And then that's when we came to SFS. We also, he brought a couple of his friends down and wanted to have this fighter house. And so it was me, Jake, a kid named Joel, a kid named David, all living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Ypsi. Yeah, for this fighter house that Jake wanted to make. We ended up moving into a 2-bedroom apartment eventually, and David's girlfriend, Taylor, moved in. So there was even another person. And then Casey, his cousin, moved in. So we had all these people living in a 2-bedroom apartment for this fighter house. Mind you, I was the only person in the year and a half of this fighter house to fight. So Jake never fought in this time of the fighter house. I think eventually David and Joel fought, or I know Joel had like a grappling match one of the times that I fought too. But yeah, it was just it was interesting.
Take us back to that perspective, because now you sit here today as a professional fighter who's fought in Japan, fought in Bellator. You have a big year coming up. Your training partner is the world champion at the Atomweight division for Invicta FC. But take us back to that young girl's perspective. Can you reflect on like what your hopes were at that point, your goals, your dreams, how you thought you were going to achieve them, and then reflect on it from nowadays, knowing, where you're at?
Yeah, so I was a very different person and fighter back then. I was actually like really insecure, and that's why I know you use me as an example a lot, and that's why I wanted to do this mental warfare podcast, because I used to be very mentally weak, and I would be training, and I would get so upset with myself, and I would never be able to take like criticism well. I would never, like if I had a bad training session, I thought it was the worst ever, and I needed to quit. So I mean, in that time, I didn't really know what my path was with fighting. Like at that time, I don't even think I wanted to go pro. I was just fighting to fight, to test my skills. I guess that's what I thought I was doing. And I had no intention to ever go pro at that point. And it seemed like probably every other month I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I quit. There's plenty of times where you'd see me, punch the mat and cry and like walk off the mat. And that's like, I laugh at myself now because I'm like, I can't believe I acted like that back then. But it was a lot of insecurities I had with myself, and I just I didn't have much confidence or anything like that. So back then, yeah, I didn't know what my path was. And looking back at it, I'm like, man, I'm glad I never quit, because now I fought for 2 of the biggest promotions in the world, and it's just going up from here.
And truly, I mean, those points were probably powerful and necessary to get you to be the woman you are today. Because although, I mean, I remember the time where, you'd throw a tantrum, you'd punch the mat, you'd walk away. But there was a certain competitive spirit that you always had. That's why you got so upset. You thought that you could be better than what you were. You know what I mean? And you would get very frustrated with yourself. When you would get overwhelmed and stuff, it would get to you emotionally because you expect higher from yourself. But you were at a point where, and I think a lot of it came down to self-confidence. And I think it came down to your life off the mats. You weren't in a position that really made you feel like you needed to feel, or, capable enough, powerful enough, worthy enough to be able to conquer the challenges that were in front of you. So let's fast forward a little bit to your professional debut. You end up making a pro debut. How are you feeling at that point in time? You're about to become a professional fighter, from the woman that was every other month, do I do this? Do I not do this? Let's talk a little bit about your life at that point. Let's talk about that pro debut. Is Jake still in your life at this point? What does your life look like?
Okay. So yeah, Jake and I ended up getting a divorce, and he had some falling outs with me and the roommates. He ended up moving back to Oklahoma, and some of our roommates still train, but they've all kind of gone their separate ways, and I can't remember exactly what fight. I think it was when I fought for the WXC title against Jen Strazazar was the point that Jake and I weren't together anymore. And yeah, it was because they still used my Shanks name, and I was upset that they didn't change it back to Watkins. But so at that point, we weren't anymore. And then I ended up dating somebody else, and it was just a toxic relationship, I think I got out of that. I thought I was bettering myself, and like I had found more of myself, and then I got into this kind of toxic relationship that set me back again. And then I think that's when I fought Chelsea, what's her last name? I can't remember her last name now, but for at the Joe Louis Arena for the IFL title. And I lost that fight, and then that was at 115. Most of my amateur career I fought at 115. And then at that point, I think we took another fight, and then I wanted to drop to 105 as an amateur before I went pro. And we had several fights drop out. I was supposed to fight Kayla McRory, and that fell through. And I think we might have had one other opponent in there that fell through. And it was like 4 months of me getting ready to cut down to 105 for the first time, and it just never happened. So we decided to, make my pro debut. And I think Alicia was supposed to fight Rachel Sazoff at first, but then she got the Kunlun call. And then, so that fight was opened, and that's when I stepped up to take my pro debut. And I was really excited. At this point in my career, I wanted to go pro. Like, that, whatever had happened in my life changed that. I had new goals, and I had higher expectations for myself. And so, made my pro debut, and it was an awesome feeling. I do wish I would have been able to make that amateur Atomweight cut, because I had a very rough cut, my pro debut. And I missed weight. I've never missed weight since then. I never missed weight before then, but I was also fighting at 115, which is, when I'm in shape, I walk not far from there. So, yeah, I missed weight. My pro debut was really rough. I tried to cut 10 pounds of water in a day, and I didn't know what I was doing, and it was bad. But luckily, she still took the fight, and yeah.
So now let's talk about your life outside of the academy and outside of the fight at this point, because you had lightly touched on the subject of you fell into a toxic relationship after your divorce. Is that during the time of your pro debut? How long does that last? What makes you finally start realizing that it's not a healthy thing that you're in? Because, I remember you were going through so many internal battles throughout the point, and I always tried to do it in the best way that I thought would make you grow, but I would poke at you constantly. And I would do it in a way that I was trying to fire up the girl inside that said, you're right, this isn't me. I don't have to, list all these excuses to why I can't do this or I can't do that, or you don't understand, James. Like, the amount of times you said to me, you don't understand, James, was me trying to say, no, Tabatha, you're better than you realize, and you have more potential than you realize, but you are holding yourself down. Talk a little bit about what your life is outside of fighting at that point. You make a pro debut. Are you still in this bad relationship? How long does that last? And then what makes you finally snap out of it a little bit? Because in the last, especially year or so, maybe even 6 months, you have evolved tremendously, and that girl had already grown tremendously. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, yeah. So that, I've been in a few toxic relationships, but it's made me who I am today. So, I take it with a grain of salt, and I look at the positives that come out of it. But so that first toxic relationship, I was out of that by the time I took my pro debut, which is probably what helped me get to that point to want to step up, to want to make my pro debut, and to be successful in that. I did win my pro debut by unanimous decision. It was a really good fight, even though I was not in the shape, anywhere close to the shape I'm in now, or I have been in any of my fights since then. I still had a dominant performance and mentally was with it and was strong, and was successful in my pro debut. I ended up moving back up north. So this is where the move happens. I think it probably happened right before my pro debut, but I was still able to train full-time. It was either right before or right after. I think it might have been right after. So because of that toxic relationship, I was in a bad financial situation because I had lived with a person, things fell through, I lost a bunch of money. I couldn't support myself financially anymore. It's significantly cheaper to live in northern Michigan than it is down here, and all my family's up there. So I needed to get back on my feet. So I ended up moving back up north, but there's nowhere to train up there at the level that I'm at. So I was like, well, I still have to somehow make sure that I can train at SFS. I just didn't know at that point how often it would be. I was just going to take it day by day and try to do what I could. So after my pro debut, I go up north. I ended up working at a fitness gym, which saved me in some extent because I was at least able to stay in shape and keep my sanity at some point, because I knew I wouldn't be training often because I was living almost 3 hours away. So I was, and then I got my job at the Postal Service. So going up north was a setback for sure, and in my, like, propelling my career in MMA, but a lot of essential things happened, like getting the job at the Postal Service, and I needed that time to build myself back up. So I ended up getting in another relationship while I was up there, which is what has made me who I am now. I went through a lot of hardships in that time. I was very stuck. We had talked about me getting out of this and moving back for like probably a year before I actually did. And so I ended up, before that, I guess I got a little ahead of myself. So before that, I ended up fighting. My second pro fight was I jumped up to 115 because it had been a year since I had fought at that point, and we couldn't really find an atomweight. So I fought Rachel. I've fought so many Rachels. I don't remember her last name. I'm bad with names right now. But anyways, I fought her for PFO at 115, and it was a good fight. She was a lot bigger than me. We knew at that point I would never fight at 115 again unless I were to, make some serious changes and gain a lot of size, because she was way bigger than me. I walked in weighing 114, like eating normal, didn't cut any water, so she was way bigger. But I ended up winning that fight, third round armbar. So at this point, I'm 2-0. And then my third pro fight is in Tennessee, and I got the 2-minute armbar in the first round.
Against an incredibly hyped wrestler, a girl that was making her pro debut, if I remember right, Carmen. And, she had a lot of hype behind her. She was a high-level wrestler, and a lot of people thought you were going to go down there and not have an answer for her wrestling. And I remember you shocked everybody. That fight was under a minute. She threw you, and from maybe 5 or 10 seconds later, there was an armbar finish. It was an incredible fight. So at this point now, you're 3-0, right? Although you're having serious success in the cage, you're on fire. You're 3-0 as an atomweight. You're surging. People are starting to know your name. What is your personal life like? And then we'll get into the biggest opportunity of your life.
Yeah. So, at that point is when things in my personal life were starting to get really difficult. And I was just stuck in a very hard, toxic, relationship and just life circumstances at that point. And I was stuck training 2.5 hours away from where I train. It was really hard just to deal with that mentally.
Just, only as much as you want to go into it. But when you say like you were stuck in a very toxic relationship, it's such a generalized statement. I don't think people understand what you actually went through or what you were going through. And a lot of people might just hear that and say like, just get out of it. Why were you stuck? Why couldn't you make a change? You're a 3-0 undefeated professional fighter who's making her dreams come true. You're still finding a way to travel to a gym that is 2.5 hours away to get the work you need. You're training in an athletic facility to keep yourself in shape. You're on top of the world from a lot of people's eyes, but at least in your own mind, you weren't. Can you go more into that? Because that might help the women that, that are going to listen to this story and get inspired by you, they're going to realize like what you were really struggling with, and then we can talk about what finally broke you free, what you know now versus then, etc.
Right. So yeah, I'll go into a little bit more detail because that can be really generalized. So throughout my whole life, I've kind of dealt with some kind of emotional or mental abuse or trauma or whatever word you want to use. Like, I guess, go back a little bit. My parents got divorced when I was 10, and it was a really rough divorce. Like some parents get divorced and everything's fine. Some people's, it's rough, So there was just, my parents were they had huge, issues between them, and it caused issues for me and my little brother. I was 10, he was 5. So from that point is when I started to deal with like some deep emotional and mental trauma. So at 10 years old is when that all started. And it took a few years, but things ended up working out over time. And I have a great relationship with both of my parents and both of my step-parents. But there was a big chunk of time where I had really rough relationships with my parents. And so that's what started that part of my past of emotional and mental trauma. And I've always been a person, I don't have this anymore, but I definitely used to have like a rescuer's complex. I would just want to like help people, and I would just like dedicate my whole life to whoever I was trying to help at that point. And that's what put me in a few different toxic relationships in my past. So fast forwarding back to where we were. So I was in this relationship, and I had known this guy for a very long time. Our families were very close. So there were aspects of this relationship that I felt like I had to stay in because our families were so close, and there was a lot tied together there. So I had a few mentally and emotionally abusive relationships up till this point. So I was, I guess you could say, more easily manipulated, or it affected me much deeper than it had prior, because it had been so much time that I had been dealing with a mental and emotional trauma that it just got worse, or it started to feel like that's what I'm supposed to feel like that's how my life's supposed to be, that's what I deserve. And it was very hard to handle, just like any time that I felt down on myself, I felt like it was my fault. Or if something went wrong, I felt like it was my fault. And so I felt like I couldn't leave to better myself, because I was told that was selfish. And I've never wanted to be selfish. I've never been a selfish person. So when someone would tell me that me dedicating more time to training, or me, like chasing my fighting dream with what I should have been, was selfish, it really cut me deep. And that's what I felt like. I can't move back to SFS, because that would make me leave this relationship, and then I would be selfish, and then I would hurt people, and I didn't want to do that. And it just took a really long time for me to accept that sometimes you have to be selfish, or you're going to stay in a miserable situation forever. It just took me a long time to realize that.
I want to talk for a second about what made that switch. I love when things, get to a tipping point and someone changes their life, because there's countless people all over this planet that know that a change needs to take place. They know it. Their friends can tell them, their family can tell them. They know it internally, but I love those moments when they finally take action. Mm-hmm. What caused that for you? What was different one day when you woke up, where it was finally the day that you said, I am going to be what you would deem selfish, but I'm going to pursue the life of happiness that I know is out there for me. I'm going to pursue my goals. I'm going to chase my dreams. What made you finally make the switch? Because you had me poking at you for a couple years. You had many people around you telling you things, like, Tabatha, you deserve better than what you're doing. Yeah. It's not healthy. But then you finally did it. Where did that come from?
Okay, so after the Tennessee fight, we ended up getting the Bellator offer. So that was like a 2-week notice fight for Bellator against Lindsey Van Sant. And I was ready. And at this point, I was good. Like, things were bad in my personal life, but I was like, sweet, this gives me a reason to put all my time into training. And there was no way that this person was going to, he did kind of break me down because of it, but I knew that if I was like, hey, I get to fight for Bellator in 2 weeks, like I have to be downstate every day training until I go take this fight. This is huge, this is huge. So it gave me a little break from the issues that were happening in my personal life. And I was able to fully just focus on training for this opportunity. And I knew that I had to dedicate everything to it because I only had like 2.5 weeks. And then a lot happened with that Bellator fight that was stressful, but we made it there. We ended up having to figure out our own travel, which was a lot to do. It was in Connecticut, and it was 2 weeks away. So I think we had like a 1.5 weeks time, and I had to come up with a bunch of sponsors to be able to pay for our plane tickets to even get there. But, there was no way we weren't taking that. We even talked about it. Win or lose, I'm taking this fight. Like, there's nothing bad can come of it. So we went there, and it was a good fight. I feel like it was an early stoppage. Things could have been differently, especially if I was able to train full-time for that fight. Things would have been a lot different. But it was all a good experience, I think. I don't mind that I lost that fight. It was worth the experience for sure. So I know after that fight, you and I had a talk, and it was, look how close you came, only training at maybe 50% potential on a 2-week fight camp.
And remember, this is when you're still living up north. For the people listening, yeah. Tabatha's training 10% of the amount of time that everybody else in this building is training. And yet she's fighting a girl who, Lindsey is ranked top 10, I believe, in the world at Atomweight. This girl was incredible. Alicia just fought her to a split decision before she won her world title. This girl is top tier. And you training really a couple days a month downstate, you were competing with this woman. For the people listening, if Tabatha had been here consistently throughout that time, I think she dominates that fight, and now you're a 4-0 professional getting signed wherever you want. So you hit that first roadblock where you're like, man, I could have had this. Then let's talk what takes place.
Yeah, so exactly what you just said. At that point, I was like, all right, I'm so close, and I'm only dedicating myself maybe 50% of the time. Like 50 is probably even overestimating. So I knew, I was like, I could do this. Like, I just made it to Bellator. That was one of the biggest stages in the world, and I did fight. Like, Lindsey was like their golden girl at that point. And she didn't just dominate me. We were like, it was a good fight until the ref stoppage. It was definitely a good fight. I almost caught her in an armbar, I think, twice. So it was very close, and that's what really started to change my mind to where I was like, I need to figure out how to get back downstate. I need to figure out how to be able to invest myself in my training because I'm this close. I'm so close. And if I would have won that, like you said, I would have been 4-0, and I would have taken her golden girl spot. Like I would have had the spotlight at that point. And she ended up fighting Alicia for the number 1 contendership. That could have been me. So, not fighting Alicia, but, number 1 contendership. So that's when I really I had to somehow figure out how to get out of that situation.
The idea at least started to get in your head. You really started thinking, okay, it's time. I'm right there. My dreams are in my fingertips. I just need to seize them. Now, if I remember correctly, then you get the fight in Japan, which is unbelievable.
Fight for Clip happened before that.
Oh, okay. All right. So the next fight, you took your loss with Lindsey, and you weren't in a good space because you were still in that toxic relationship. You might have the idea that like, okay, I have to make these changes. But then I remember that a fight offer came up from Motor City, and you basically said, James, I'm taking this and I'm going to beat this girl, and you don't know what you're talking about. And just let me do this. Right. Let's talk a little bit about that point.
Yeah. So this is when the real change happened in me. So like I said, after the Bellator, it's definitely a thought in my head. I knew what I needed to do. I just didn't know how to go about it, and I didn't know how to make those tough decisions, but I knew that I needed to. it definitely was a thought in my head every day at that point. I knew how close I was and what I needed to do to get there. I just didn't know how to do it. So, yeah, so things in this relationship started to get worse, honestly, because this person knew that change had happened in my head. And when someone is emotionally and mentally abusive, if they sense that the person that they're with they're starting to lose control, they step it up, So things got worse. Things got worse before I was able to get out, because at that point he knew that I was going to leave. He was scared that I was going to leave because he knew if I was going to live up to my potential, I had to. And after that Bellator fight, it was noticeable that that's what I needed to do. So things definitely got worse. That's why I took that fight. That's why I told you that I'm taking this fight no matter what, because I literally I thought I needed an escape. It was my escape from reality. I was like, okay, I just need a fight camp. I need to just fight. And it was not a good decision. So that's why I took the fight. That's the only reason. And that's why I went about it like I did, because I just wanted an escape, temporary, because I still didn't know how to get out of it. Because like I said, things got worse. I thought I had a grip. I was like, all right, I can do this. I can get out of this. I can move back downstate. And then it was worse. And so I was like, okay, I just need to fight. I need to get my mind off it. I just need to fight. And it was a very deep emotional reason to fight. It wasn't what it should have been. And so I wish I would have took that fight in a different time, because I dominated the first round. Like, just in every aspect of the fight, just ran through this girl in the first round. So things, even before my fight, like 2 hours before that fight, I got in a really bad fight with the guy I was with, and mentally broke me before I even warmed up for my fight, So I just tried to shake it off, like, whatever, like, this is your opportunity, you need to win this fight, But my mind was so messed up at that point, and I was emotionally already so heightened that fighting is very mental and very emotional. So if you're already, all jacked up, there's no way that you'll be able to put yourself in the mental, emotional state that you need to be to succeed in fighting. So, yeah, like I said, like 2 hours before the fight, I'm already in a very bad spot. So the first round, I used my emotions like as fuel, So I was like, all right, this is my time, So I just tear this girl up the first round. Second round, I'm a little tired, not really. I mean, I was conditioned enough to be able to fight. But she tagged me. Like, she hit me a couple good times, and then all my insecurities and my old, like, want to quit tendencies came back, and I knew how weak I was mentally at that point, and I was like, I don't even want to fight anymore. And I literally just let her hit me until the ref stopped it. I just quit fighting. And I look back at that, and I'm like, man, I really wish I would have been out of that situation by then, or didn't take that fight, because escaping reality to fight isn't the reason to do it.
Even to just hear you say that today as a coach is wonderful, because you weren't ready to hear that advice then, and you needed to go through that event. But you know what? The woman you are today is because you finally did make the switch. So now we can talk about this, and you can let go of any feelings of what if, I should have, I could have. It doesn't matter, because now you've made the changes. The woman that sits across the table from me today is going to take the world by storm in 2021. I know this. Alicia knows this. You know this, and many other people know this. People are going to reflect on the old Tabatha Watkins and think that's the girl that's going to show up to the ring, and they're going to be sadly mistaken. So then let's talk about your fight with Ryzen in Japan with Alicia. Absolutely incredible, life-changing opportunity. Is that gentleman still in the picture at this point? Is he already out? Let's talk about that fight, and then we'll kind of bring us up to current speed.
Okay. So after that loss for Clip, that's when I really knew. Like, after Bellator, I knew I needed to make changes to be able to be where I wanted to be. But in that point, I knew that for my own mental health, I had to make a change. Because I knew right when the fight ended that I just gave up on myself. And I knew that I wasn't mentally strong enough to fight. And I had worked on that part of my fighting so much throughout my whole career. Like you said, I would in the beginning, I would throw tantrums and cry and say I was going to quit and punch the mat. I had gotten through all that. I was able to accept bad training sessions. I thought I was mentally strong as far as my fighting aspect, but I didn't put into consideration that your whole life has to be mentally positive or you'll fall back. And so at that loss, that's when I knew that's what it was. And it wasn't just that I needed to get out of this to be able to chase my career better. It was that I needed to get out of this for my mental health. So that's when things really changed. And I had started to train more. I was emotionally and mentally separated from this relationship. I just didn't know how to turn it into a physical I left thing at that point. So I technically was still in this relationship when the Ryzen opportunity came, but it was they didn't have that control over me that they did before, because I knew that mentally I couldn't deal with that anymore, or I had lost myself, and I know what that feels like to completely lose yourself, to not know who you are, and to feel just completely worthless. And I never wanted to feel like that again. So I didn't let this person have that control over me anymore. Their abusive tendencies didn't affect me anymore. So I think I did end up breaking up with this person before we went to Japan. But I still was living there. And it was just like I was never there. We never saw each other because I had fully committed to training. So I was down here like 5 days a week. I went up to Grayling to work like 2 days a week. And so I was able to mentally fully be there for the Ryzen fight. And it was an amazing opportunity. And that was one of my best performances. And I fought in a ring, like across the world, and with Ryzen rules, which is crazy. For a grappler, Ryzen rules is crazy. So, and it was I never mentally broke in that fight, and it was my toughest fight for sure. I mean, I was having to deal with so much adversity, different rules. Different, the way that they score is completely different. It's a ring, it's in Japan. The time zones, fortunately we went early. There was a typhoon. Things were crazy. Things were crazy in Japan, but fortunately we decided to leave 2 days early. And Alicia and I adjusted. You did not adjust on your time zones. Me and Alicia stayed up for like 48 hours to be able to adjust to Japan's time zone, which luckily we did, because for the rest of the week, we were on Japan time. So that didn't affect me. Everything that I did for that fight, I prepared like I should have, and mentally was at the strongest I'd ever been. Performed very well. I broke the girl's arm. She tapped out, but the ref didn't see it. The announcer called it. But so I technically lost that fight, but I don't look at it as a loss at all, because I gained so much from that experience, and I technically did win because I made her tap out. But, things happen. But that was like, my turning point happened before Ryzen. So that was like the reassurance that I knew that what I did was right. And I finally felt like, okay, this is good. This is what I needed to do. It was like my reassurance that what I did was right and what I needed to do to better myself.
So let's talk about your life currently to this point. And let's talk for also a second about, you just helped Alicia in her training camp to fight for the world title, and she won. Your training partner is the #1 Atomweight, and at least in the United States, Invicta World Champion. And, she's someone that everybody knows in the Atomweight division. And you were the one that was side by side with her through the entire camp. Let's talk a little bit about what that experience was like, what it was like to watch your training partner win the world title, and where you're at now in life. Because I've always said to you since day one, when I saw the spirit that you had behind all the chaos, behind the self-doubt, behind all the things that were in front of Tabatha, I always said, if you could actually commit to training, you are a natural athlete, you have the desire to fight, you're going to be very, very successful. I feel that 2021 is going to be that rebirth. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about the Alicia fight camp and where you are at this day and time.
Okay. Yeah, so after Ryzen, I ended up fully getting out of that bad situation. it took me a little while, but I ended up getting a postal service transfer to Pinckney. So I was able to transfer my job and move downstate. And so I've been at SFS full-time since probably February. So right before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened. Luckily, it only set us back about a month or so. We were able to open back up. So I've been training full-time for most of this year. I've gone through all of Alicia's fight camps with her this year. So it's like I've been training like I've had a fight all year. But those opportunities haven't presented themselves for me. But all that has made me is more ready for the time that I do, because I'm helping Alicia evolve all year, which makes me evolve all year, and she had 3 fights this year. So yeah, I helped her prepare for my former opponent, Lindsay Vincent. So for the number 1 contender spot. So that we pushed each other a lot. That was probably the biggest part of this year before her world title fight, that we really pushed each other. And I knew that I had to push her harder because I fought her, So I've just been evolving all year, and it's not effortless because you put in a lot of work, but the mental aspect of it for me has been effortless, and that's always been something I've struggled. But I fully changed that in this time. I read a lot of books that helped me. I've gotten more spiritual, not necessarily like with my Christianity. I still believe that way, but I'm big into the law of attraction, and I really feed off energies now. I don't have time for negative energy in my life. So I've spent a lot of my life with negative energy, and I know what that's like, and I know how dark it's got for me, and I never want to feel like that again. So over the course of this year, on top of just fully dedicating myself to training, I've fully grown mentally and spiritually, and all I want is positive energy in my life now.
So let's talk a little bit about your goals. What's coming up for Tabatha? What is next year going to look like for you? You're moving in with Alicia, so you're going to have the world champ in your division is your roommate and training partner. Talk a little bit about what 2021 should look like for you, and just anything else you want to go into.
Okay, yep. So Alicia and I spend a lot of time together. She's one of my best friends, and it's been amazing being able to train full time and go through her fight camps with her, because for most of this year I knew that I needed to train for a while before I wanted to fight again. I wanted to be able to be training full time at my full potential for at least a few months before I were to fight. So, towards the end of the year, I've been like, all right, it's my turn. I want to fight, but I understand, what's going on in the world, and it's hard to get a fight right now, and I understand that. I'm just staying ready. Going through her fight camps has kept me fight ready. I've been fight ready all year. So, I also started training full time with Chris Down, which has been huge for me. So I've always been athletic, but I've never had a chance to fully focus on becoming the best physical athlete that I could. And then Phoenix Athletics coming to MIA has been huge for me, because the Downs brought me in as one of their sponsored athletes, because Alicia was inviting me to her sessions, because I'm her training partner, and I pretty much do all of her sessions with her when she's in a fight camp. And now I'm one of their sponsored athletes, and I work with Chris at least 2 to 3 times a week, and it's been huge for me.
I want to talk a little bit as a final thing. For any woman that's going through what you went through, that are in those dark mental places, that have lived around negative energy, like you said, women that know that there's potential for more, they know they deserve a better life, and they probably have a lot of people around them telling them, like, you got to make a change. Is there anything, having lived through those experiences yourself, that you think you could have said to yourself back then that would have had an impact, or just any advice that you could give? Anything that you would do to try to help the people that were in your former state? Because the woman that sits here today is so much happier, so much lighter, so much, more fueled to be, you're just so much more excited for the future. And that is going to attract the best things in your life. Whether you want to buy into the law of attraction or not, when you do better, you tend to get better results.
Right.
And the way that you're living is often a reflection of that. Is there anything that you would say to people in that former situation?
Yeah, so, what I learned with that is for a year, I had everybody in my life telling me that I needed to get out of that situation. And literally everybody, my parents, my best friends, everybody here, you know, everybody I looked up to, everybody that I, would run to for comfort were all telling me that I needed to get out of that. And I knew that, but I wasn't able to do it until I was able to do it. So the hardest part with that is people can be telling you what you should do over and over again for who knows how long it will take, and you'll know that. But that point in your life has to happen where you make that change, where you're like, okay, and you can accept that you know what you need to do, and you can accept anything that is to come from that. Because when I did leave, I got a lot. All that abuse came out at me in an instant, like all those things that were said that would usually break me down, were presented to me again. But I had that change in my mind and in my heart that I knew that I didn't deserve that, and that I had to get away from that to better myself. So my biggest advice would be, don't ever let someone tell you that, like, your feelings aren't as important. Don't ever let someone say that you wanting to invest in yourself is selfish, because you can't help people if you're not in a good spot. You need to be the best version of yourself to be able to bring positive energy to the world. So the hardest part is you're not going to be able to make the changes that people are telling you to, that you might know you have to, until you can make that switch in your head and in your heart that you know that you need to do that and you deserve that.
It sounds like when you were telling me the story that it came down to you started to have a stronger belief in yourself. You went to those opportunities, you almost beat Lindsey Van Zandt at Bellator, and you started to think that, wait, I have potential. It's almost like you started to build your self-worth more, or your self-esteem, or you saw potential. You saw what life could be for you versus what life was. And that probably was a crucial aspect. So maybe a lot of those people that are in those places of suffering, they need to find something within that makes them go, I deserve better than this. Life can be better than this. And then you said it very beautifully, where you said you hit a point where you knew no matter what comes from this, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make this decision. Throw at me anything you want. It is still better for me to have to walk through that final obstacle than stay where I am now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Everything you just said, I agree with. And yeah, I mean, self-worth and self-love was a big part of my journey. And yeah, it sucks that people in abusive relationships or friendships, or, if your parents are like that, anything like that, if you're in an abusive situation, you feel like you're worthless. It tears you apart in that way, that you feel like you don't have any self-worth, and you don't have any self-confidence, you don't have any self-love. So you deserve to feel worthy. You are worthy, and you should love yourself. And no one that is good for you in your life should make you feel different. And that would be my biggest suggestion and advice, is just find yourself and know what you deserve and what makes you happy, and know that you're worthy and that you should love yourself no matter what anybody tells you.
And hearing your words, as a coach, I try to always break things down to a science, to a step process. I can almost see baby steps in the idea that if you're in a really dark place or a really difficult situation, make sure you do one thing a day or one thing a week that makes you feel good about you. You have to start baby stepping again, rebuilding who you are, to even have the strength to take on whatever demons are in your life, right? If you don't build that strength, you're not going to be up for that battle. So if you're in a dark place, make sure you do something at least once a day, try, that you just feel good about being you. Because if you can start to do that, you'll strengthen yourself up enough to take on the battles that are ahead of you that you need to fight, instead of, you knew the battle was there forever. You know what I mean? You knew the battle was right in front of your face. And sometimes your brain might tell you well, no, it's this, or this is the reason that I'm not. But you know what the fight was. And then you finally conquered it. And like I said, the woman that sits before me today, I mean, you are not even close to the former version of yourself. You're so much more powerful. You radiate such better energy. I've put you through some absolutely grueling sessions when Alicia was in fight camp for her world title. We're doing a world title fight camp. I mean, I'm talking grueling sessions. and you didn't complain. You fought through it. If anything, at the end of the sessions, you were like fired up. You were like, that was awesome. I need more of that. The old Tabatha wouldn't have made it through 5% of what you're doing now.
For sure.
So, like I said, as a coach, it's one of the most beautiful things to witness is someone actually start to realize their potential and then create reality from that potential. So I think 2021 is going to be a breakout year for you. I've already talked to Shannon about you. I said, like, listen, this girl has serious potential and she's making the right adjustments now. Just wait and see. I'm going to be calling you after her next 2 wins and saying, you better sign this Atomweight before she's one of the best in the world, and we're right there now. So just, man, anything else that you'd want to capture on this podcast, Tabatha, anything you'd want to send to people that are struggling, any thank yous you want to send, just really anything to capture in this moment in time, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about my goals right now and what I see for myself, kind of just what you said, and then I'll give a couple shout outs. But yeah, if I can fight by the end of this year, I'm fighting. Like, we're staying ready. Like I said, I've gone through all of Alicia's fight camps. It's been like a fight camp for me. Like you just said, you've put me through some of the toughest sessions of my entire career, and I went through them. Like, I walked through that fire. Like, hey, just made me better. I'm ready. So, I tried out for the XFC, and that went really well. I got a call back. I did well. I spoke with Myron and Eduardo and Steve, and they all, took very big interest into me and told me they'd be in touch. And, that'd be huge. That'd be huge for me. I would love to be a part of the XFC, but I'm down for any opportunity that presents itself. If there are promotions out there, you got Atomweights, that you're throwing a show by the end of the year, sign me up, and I'm ready. I'm ready whenever. And this is my comeback year. I will rise, and I will be something that no one knows. No one knows what's coming for me, and I know that people are going to underestimate me because they're gonna compare me to the old version of me, which is nothing like I am now, like you said. And like now, people know that over the course of the last few years, I was barely training, and I made it to Bellator and I made it to Ryzen, and they were close fights. So, and that was barely training. That was training for my fight camps or coming in to spar with Alicia. That was pretty much all I had. I've fully invested myself into training for this whole year. I've gone through fight camps with Alicia. I've completely changed my nutrition, my fitness aspect. I work with one of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the country daily, so I've completely evolved in every aspect of the word, and I'm ready to just demolish any obstacle in my way. And I can't wait. I can't wait for 2021 because I'm so ready. I'm so ready to show the world what I've become and what I'm capable of at my full potential, because the world has never seen that.
As wild as it is, 2020 is going to be one of your best years ever. You helped your training partner win the world title. You earned your purple belt this year, which is something you fought hard for. The universe is rewarding you. It's like you finally made that leap of faith that you had to make for years, and now all of a sudden things are lining up for you. You're finding success over and over and over, and I think that's just going to be a snowball effect into 2021. So yeah, just anything else you want to capture? And
yeah, so exactly what you said. I'm just excited and I'm ready, and 2021 will be my year. And 2020, honestly, was probably the best year of my life. And it's crazy, and I almost feel a little bad because I know that this pandemic really hit people hard, and it really, this year was the worst for a lot of people. But for me, it was honestly the best year of my life because I've made those changes that I knew I had to make. Like you said, I'm a completely different person. And a lot of people that know me at a very deep personal level have said, like, holy crap, like, you've changed so much. And, like, it's been huge for me. And I'm finally who I need to be and who I knew I could be. I just didn't know how to be that person. And I've definitely become the best version of myself, and I'm just continuing to better myself. And I'm just ready. I'm ready for whatever comes next. I'm ready to make my rise. I want to be Alicia's world champ right now. I want to be number 2 in the world. And then, I'm sure, her path's going to change. My path's going to change. I want to be a world champ in 2021. I'm going to say that right now. It's going to happen. Yeah, my purple belt in jiu-jitsu was huge, and I love pursuing jiu-jitsu as much as I do MMA. So, I'm going to say that I want to be a world champion in jiu-jitsu and in MMA by the end of 2021. It's going to happen. a couple thank yous is just like my family and my friends, my closest friends. I'm not going to list names. There's a lot of people, but everyone who's been there through this whole journey with me, you know, that has seen all my struggles and helped those people that were telling me for a year, you deserve better than this, you can do better than this, like, you need to focus on yourself, all those things. I'm appreciative of them so much, because I might have never made this decision on my own without those people that I knew were supporting me. And I'm thankful, you know, for you, Coach, for always knowing my potential and trying to push me to that level and believing in what I was capable of. And, you know, Alicia being one of my best friends and training partners is huge for me. Like, we are helping each other become the best in the world, and it's a blessing. The downs, I'm super thankful for them. You know, Chris has helped me tremendously in my athleticism, you know, so huge thank you to them. Hillary is great too, you know, so she's always there to help us when we need recovery. All my sponsors, I got a sponsor when I competed in Tennessee for Leg Lock Apparel, and he actually brought me into his company, and now I'm part of the Leg Lock brand, which is huge. So it's just, I've had a lot of blessings this year, and it's hard for me to even think about them all on the spot. But you know, if you're someone who has positively impacted my life this year, like, I am so grateful and thankful for you.
Last thing, how do people follow you on your social media, or, you know, how do they support your career, follow you, become a fan, reach out to you? What's the best route?
So Instagram at Tabatha Batgirl is my Instagram, so follow me on there. And then my athlete page on Facebook is Tabatha Batgirl Watkins. So you just give me a follow on there, you know. And I know that Chelsea Legrassi is coming to train with me next week, so I'm pretty pumped about that. So any girls out there that, you know, that want to train, hit James up. You know, I'm always down to get some work in with some new girls, and I'm just, you know, here to train and have some fun.
You'll be downstate for the female mega camp next year. You know what I mean? You'll be here all the time. It'll be epic. We're going to probably hold that around May, I think. We're going to do the female mega camp for 2021. So, Tabatha, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for telling your story and going into the details. You know what I mean? Because that's what can help people. Truth and bravery. You know, we need more stories like this. So it was wonderful. We went over an hour pretty much effortlessly. You know, so just thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Coach, for having me. It was nice to be able to finally tell my story. You know, a lot of people might not know all those things that I've went through. So I hope that I can inspire people.